Recently we did a video comparing the M1 and the M4 processors, specifically with the M1 and the M4 Mac Mini. And I was very happy to see the results, and I think it's a great tool for anybody that's looking to upgrade and wondering how much improvement the M4 is going to be over their M1. And since I already had most of the data done, I decided let's do the same thing for the M2. Hey everybody, it's Chris from FamilyGeekery, and today we're going to be checking out the M2 versus the M4, and we're going to be looking at these Mac Minis. Remember that if you've got a MacBook Air or MacBook Pro, the performance improvements are going to be about the same. There are going to be some differences depending on how much RAM you have, and depending on what style hard drive you have, but for the most part, the processing power, the GPU power, is going to be very similar. So if you didn't see the video that we did on the M1 versus the M4, you can go ahead and check that out. I'll go ahead and pop that right up here somewhere. But since I already had that data, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it into the slides. So when we look at the slides, you'll see all three results, the M1, the M2, and the M4. Now before we look at those slides, let's look at these two computers here real quick. This is still the entry-level M4 Mac Mini with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of SSD. And for our test subject over here, we've got the M2 Mac Mini, and this is the base model as well. So it's only 8 gigabytes of RAM and also 256 gigabytes of SSD. So that will play into some of the results, and we'll see that as we look at the slides. So speaking of the slides, let's go ahead and pull up those charts now. Alright, so in each of these slides, you're going to see the comparison of the M1, the M2, and the M4 processors. In this first slide here, showing the Geekbench 6 CPU, we can see that there wasn't a whole lot of improvement from the M1 to the M2, but from both those to the M4 is substantial, with the multi-core score there being about 50% stronger than the M2, and you can see how that single core score of that M4 is just light years beyond the M1 and the M2. As we move over to the Geekbench 6 GPU tests, you can see that the OpenCL has a very linear improvement over the years, whereas the metal score of that M2 did jump up a lot from the M1, but the M4, of course, is even more powerful. Now, looking at the Cinebench 2024 CPU tests, again, we see that the single core is jumped up quite a bit from the M1 and the M2, and now that the M4 has 10 cores, that multi-core score is really jumped up from that M2 processor, almost doubling in performance. And I love this Novabench program. It kind of gives you a full picture of all the different aspects of your processor and your computer. So we see the CPU, GPU, and the memory scores there, all jumping up with the M4. While the memory and the GPU just have average improvements, that CPU is really shining on the M4, which gives us an overall score that's just towering over the M1 and M2 processors. Now let me talk you through this Blackmagic disk speed test, because if you watched the M1 versus M4 video, you'll remember that I had a little confusion between the M1 and the M4 with these particular disk speed tests. I just couldn't get the write speed on the M4 to be about the same as the read speed. And originally I thought it was because of the single chip versus dual chip architecture with this 256 gigabyte SSD versus the 512 on the M1, but this chart shows that the M2, which definitely had the problem of the single chip architecture of the SSD, was really limited in speed by that choice. So we do have an improvement on the M4 just stock with the 256 over the M2, but I think they're finding that the 512 does give you a benefit, and as you go up in capacity, you do get faster speeds with these M4 processors. The problem is they charge so much for those increases, and it's certainly cheaper to get an external drive if you need added capacity. Now I'm going to flip it back over to this Novabench slide for the wrap-up, just because it kind of shows the increase in all the different aspects of the M4 platform versus the predecessors. And it's good to see this all on one slide so you can see that Apple is still doing a great job of increasing their performance year after year on these processors. But the bottom line is, there's nothing wrong with the M1 and the M2 right now. They're still great processors, they're still very capable machines, but as we know, as they get a little bit older, Apple will eventually discontinue support for them with their software, so that's always something to keep in the back of your mind. But for right now, if you've got an M2, unless you're really experiencing problems with that SSD speed, I think there'd be no problem with just riding that M2 for a couple more years. But if you're in the market for something new, or you need the fastest processor out there, then this M4 is obviously the way to go. It's great to see also that Apple can continue to increase the performance and still keep the price the same, with this M4 Mac Mini being $599 as the retail price, and you can find that with either education discounts or military and government discounts for even cheaper than that. You just can't go wrong with that M4 Mac Mini. So let me know if you have any questions or comments. Go ahead and throw those down below. I hope this video helped you make a decision on if you're ready to upgrade or not. If it was helpful to you, I appreciate a thumbs up. Go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. I've got other videos on these processors, and I'm going to be doing some gaming tests as well. So go ahead and subscribe and keep an eye out for those. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you as always for watching, and until next time, peace out and geek out.